was Independence Institute. I'm going to reboot my computer because it keeps putting me in. Independence Institute. I'm going to reboot my computer because it keeps putting me in.
PJ, we're just working out a little technical difficulty.
No worries.
PJ, we're just working out a little technical difficulty. PJ, we got about 30 seconds.
Hey everybody, I'm John Caldera, broadcasting live from the Studio B bar in, well, the Independence Institute, because we're still in semi-lockdown, but we always drink here. We haven't done this show for, a few weeks because, quite honestly, my liver couldn't take it. But when we decided to start going again, I wanted one guy to help us kick this off, the one and the only PJ O'Rourke, live from what looks like a very comfortable home in New Hampshire. Hey, PJ, thanks for being with us.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks for having me there.
I asked you this before. Just want to make clear. I was surprised that you gave up your IBM Selectric. I thought you would go to your grave with that. You've actually now entered the 1980s with a word processor, and I'm pretty impressed.
I didn't exactly give up my IBM Selectric. In fact, I've still owned 4 of them. What happened was the last guy in a 100-mile radius who knew how to repair them died.
So the only reason you finally now have Windows 98 is because of
yeah. So
you could move.
I finally went to computers, and actually once I did, I found out it was loads easier. But you know, it still bugs me. I mean, it doesn't make it thinking any faster, but it does make the process of having thought.
Are you one of those two key guys, 2-finger writers? You have old school.
I have been making my living as a writer for 50 years, and I'm now up to, let's see, no, not that thumb. I'm up to 4 fingers. 50 years of typing. I've typed like 10 million words, you know, and I'm still.
You realize you could have done twice as many books if you just added ring fingers.
there are probably people who are so glad that I didn't do that.
Before we get into all the other stuff, I got a couple quick questions. One, what are you drinking tonight? I hope you're drinking something.
Okay, I am drinking, I've got it right here. I am drinking Dewar's and soda on the rocks. And the reason that I drink Dewar's, or I drink either Dewar's or Famous Grouse. Famous Grouse was Margaret Thatcher's favorite whiskey. So I like, but I buy pretty much by price, and I take the advice of the heroes of the endeavor. Hunter S. Thompson, one of the great drinkers of all time. Hunter was famous for that wild turkey that he would carry around on stage, but in private, actually, he drank blended scotch. He said, if you're going to be a long ball hitter, get the best blended scotch you can find or afford. Mix it with lots of soda and lots of ice if you're going to go the distance. And so,
wow. Now,
I stick with.
How well did you know Hunter? I met him like once, and he was a complete jerk and just off his can.
Oh, Hunter had a very unfortunate public persona that he was cursed with continually living up to. In private, I mean, it sounds weird to say, but there were only so many people with whom Hunter was comfortable, and really numbered maybe 24 max.
And were you one of them?
For reasons I never fully understood, I was. I met Hunter through mutual friends, through a guy named Sims Luckett, who was very close friends with Hunter. And I sort of never, I neither hero worshipped Hunter nor did I want to try and one up him or anything. And when we discovered that what we both cared about most was literature, Hunter was one of the best read people in the world. So what Hunter and I would discuss when all the lunatics had gone home and all the drugs were used up and we were getting down to the bottom of the bottle of Chivas, what we discuss is Henry James and Edith Wharton and the Beat Poets. And so if you could get Hunter past, but Hunter had created this persona for himself that he felt he had to live up to so that in public he could just be a horror show.
Well, when I saw him, he was. So he kept
I knew him for a long time. I met him back in the 70s, and I knew him till he died.
Wow. Now, the rumor of his death, by the way, is that he chose a day to kill himself and just didn't tell anybody. That's the folklore. I don't think it's true from what I understand. If so, I kind of admire it.
Well, I think he knew he was going out. I mean, he was physically, he had broken a leg and had never really mended right. He was just physically a mess. There was so many of the things that he loved to do in life, and we needn't list them here. He just couldn't do anymore, and he just felt that he came to the end of his rope. Now that I'm older than he was when he died, I both have a certain sympathy, but I really also feel, gosh, you got to press through a little bit.
Let me ask you, I'm sure Ringo gets asked about, only the Beatle days. So pardon me for asking this, but I am always been fascinated that you were the editor of National Lampoon. And really during what I thought was its heyday, you were a writer for National Lampoon, and you worked on, was it Rodney Dangerfield's, was it Easy Money? I'm trying to remember.
Easy Money.
How did you get that gig? Because for an old guy like me, that's like prime time, Animal House era for National Lampoon.
I was very lucky. I wasn't by any means the most talented person at the National Lampoon. I was very lucky. But then there's something else too. There's a matter of hard work. And I was willing to put in that hard work. And there were a lot of geniuses who were not. And so if you're like sort of a B plus and you work your butt off, the A pluses don't necessarily come through. And I was at the Lampoon for a decade, and I basically, I was a writer there. I was a managing editor, then I was editor in chief. and there were so many people there who were so much funnier than I was, sometimes intentionally. That, but I was the person who went around and said, we have a magazine to get out. We don't get the magazine out. We don't get paid. We don't get paid. You can be as funny as you want, but you can be being funny under a bridge.
Did you work on any of the movies other than?
No, I did work on that Rodney Dangerfield movie after I left the Lampoon, but I just didn't find, words are all I know about. And I mean, I was like strictly an English major. There's only like one language in the world, and I barely speak that. And movies require a visual genius that one look at me will tell you I don't have. If I had a visual genius, I'd look better.
So as you know, I've got pretty much a theory about everything. In the 60s and 70s especially was, I think, the heyday for magazines. And magazines brought together weird communities that the internet now does. And I think about it when I interviewed and I got to know Colonel Bob Brown from Soldier of Fortune magazine.
Yes.
And I didn't quite realize the whole story. What I love about my hometown of Boulder, back when it was weird and not as elitist and smug as it is now,
Right.
is that it had Naropa Institute and Soldier of Fortune. And Soldier of Fortune hit this group of people who were disaffected, lonely Vietnam vets who had no place else to go. And when they met each other through
Right.
Soldier of Fortune, they finally found, let me be a liberal, a community. The same thing when National Review started with Bill Buckley, the same thing with Reason magazine that Bob Poole put together, same thing with National Lampoon, that all of a sudden, these weird little groups that were spread out over the country or even the world, who thought they were all alone. There's another conservative in Manhattan? I didn't know that. All of a sudden felt that they got something together. And I thought National Lampoon did that as well.
It did. I mean, we brought all the 14-year-old boys.
We are all 14-year-old boys. Now we can just drink legally.
We brought the 14-year-old boys together, and there's a 14-year-old, as any woman will tell you, there's a 14-year-old boy inside every man. Not very deep inside either.
No. My theory is that we plateau at about 15.
Yeah.
And we ride it until death. During that, they teach us which fork is a salad fork. But other than that, we haven't changed.
We really
Any
don't.
illusion of maturity is just something that women put on us. So God bless them.
Yes, mercifully, or we would be stuck forever at summer camp playing capture the flag.
Let me ask you about your home arrest here. You live up in the woods, away from everybody, is my sense. So was this mandated lockdown, did it change your life at all, or was it just a way to keep the kids at home?
Not much. I've been working for the past few years. I've been doing a web magazine called American Consequences with a group out of Baltimore. It's the magazine's about political economics, and it's basically sponsored by Investment Advisory Group. And we have a lot of fun with it. But we'd all been working remotely already. I mean, we see each other. The members of the staff see each other about 3 or 4 times a year. Well, some of them are in a home office in Baltimore, but even at the home office, they were on separate floors in different cubicles. And so we had all been communicating with each other, not so much by Zoom, but by email and phone calls for several years. And so it didn't change a beat. And of course, if you're writing about like finance and investments and stuff like that, the kind of volatility that we've had over since March, that's red meat for us. I mean, there are lots of questions and thousands of experts to go pump.
What is the weirdest writing gig you have ever been paid for? Because you have gone from Home and Garden magazine to Cato Institute to I'm pretty sure now you can probably write for Macworld or IBM Weekly
I
Uh,
suppose. Yes. If they want to know about the Y2K crisis, I'm the guy to go to. Because that's where all my equipment and skill levels are. The weirdest thing that I ever did was when I was very young, just out of college and starving to death. There was this scam artist in New York. It was those long before email scams, there were postal scams. And he was one of those guys that would get, a mailing list and would send out these get rich quick letters. And I don't know how he got my name, but anyway, he somehow, or I got his, but somehow or other we got hooked up, and he asked me to to write these scam letters. And I was so broke, and such a hippie anyway. I hated capitalism, so what did I care? The problem was I just could not, while I could write the stuff, I could not think up a good scam. I just couldn't.
you?
Me, and I should have, make your fortune in offshore banking, and then I thought, well, what's offshore? I mean, Manhattan's offshore, Long Island. Anyway, I just didn't have it. I guess that was like the beginning and the end of my criminal career.
I'm disappointed. I'm sad. I thought maybe you had some, rich Nigerian prince uncle.
Oh gosh, I
You
wish
said-
I could have thought of that.
So when you were a communist,
Mm-hmm.
what made you switch to becoming one of us? You have been I think, one of the best promoters of freedom, because you have fun with it rather than not that economists aren't just a blast to listen to, but
Yeah, yeah, a real laugh, right?
what made you switch?
Oh, it was so simple. It was so simple. I got a job after several years of being a hippie and starving and living on the fringe of things, and borrowing money from the rents, and working for the idiot scam artist, who I don't think was even a very successful scam artist. I got a job, and the job paid. It was as a messenger for a big company in New York, and the job paid $75 a week, and we got paid every 2 weeks. And I was really looking forward to that $150, and so was my landlord. And I got my first paycheck. And
I think I know the punchline coming up here.
yeah, after federal taxes, state taxes, city taxes, Social Security, whatever they called Health and Human Services stuff back then, union dues, pension fund, I netted out around $83. And it was just the scales fell from my eyes. I said, wait a minute, I'm a communist. I've protested for communism. I've written manifestos for communism. I have rioted and vandalized for communism. And now I get my first job with a big capitalist corporation. I get my first paycheck, and I find out we've got communism already. They just took half my money. I'm not Rockefeller. So,
all right, speaking of riots and protests, why don't we dive right into this, and then I'm going to invite folks to come on and chat with you directly. And if you're on the Zoom meeting, by all means, there's a little button there that says raise hand. Raise your hand, and we'll get to you. If you're on Facebook or YouTube or Caucus Room, you need to get onto the Zoom meeting in order to chat. But please, price of admission, very simple. You have to have a drink in your hand. It's the law. I didn't make up the law around here. It's just what it is. So we've been watching these protests, PJ. The building we're broadcasting from was in the center of the protests here in Denver. Windows bashed in, dumpsters lit on fire, all sorts of wonderful things. Our building was spared only because it is right next to the police station that had all the SWAT teams and armored personnel carriers and guys with gas masks. So amazingly, we got off on this, but the destruction here was incredible. And I'm trying to figure it out, and I'm having a hard time. There's so many different conflating issues. There's COVID, there's racism, there's cops, there's unemployment. But really, I think under all of this is a push for socialism. And I can't help but think we're being played, that so much of this was staged. Um, I know that you take part in a lot of riots yourself. I know it's something you and the kids do on weekends.
Yes.
What's your take?
Well, I'm more sympathetic to the protesters, I think, than you are. I think that that a lot of the anger that built up and that we saw explode. Now, first place, let's sort things out a little bit. Like get the signal from the noise. Is that we always have the destructive, the thievish, the vandals are always among us at every level of society, everywhere in the world. And chaos is their friend. And when chaos is unleashed, when their friend calls, they come. So the byproduct of any kind of large chaotic situation like this, you are going to see this kind of the destruction. You're going to see the looting. You're going to see the self-destructive behavior. But I think there's an underlying anger in the lower socioeconomic part of the United States that is, I think we saw it manifested in Trump supporters to a certain extent. And I think we see it manifested in these protests. And they really feel that the big switch in economy from world manufacturing to a world of whatever it is we're doing right now on the Zoom meeting, this strange, mysterious electronic world, has left them behind, has devalued international trade, things like NAFTA, things like the huge increase in imports from low-cost labor countries, Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, not just China. That their very lives, poor people's lives, have been devalued. And to put on top of that a huge piece of government overreach in reaction to the pandemic crisis. I mean, our reaction to the pandemic crisis has been something I haven't really seen since the old Soviet Union. It's such a combination of government overreach and government incompetence. I mean, it was obvious or should have been obvious pretty soon.
Let me jump in there and ask you. I've been mostly disappointed by those people on my team, Team Freedom, that we have been put into this, into house arrest without due process. Our businesses have been shuttered by gunpoint. And while we bitch and complain, we didn't take to the streets, not like this. And those who did were told, you're killing people because you're spreading COVID. Now, these protesters come out, and they're not spreading COVID, they're told. They're heroes working for cultural change. I'm really pissed off at my own team. I thought we should have been taken to the streets when we were put into a lockdown without any due process. I've never seen anything like this in my life, and it really hit me. You've done much more traveling than I have. It really hit me how fear creates this vacuum for tyranny to just roll right in, because people want security. They want to feel like something's under control. You've seen it in the places you've reported from much more than I could ever imagine.
Well,
I never thought I would see it personally here over a virus.
Yeah, the thing is that so maybe we didn't respond as strongly as we should. But our anger and disaffection from society has not been building and building for years. I mean, we feel that we've had a place, at least since the first Reagan administration, we've had some place at the table for the national argument. We don't always get heard, or we certainly don't carry our point very often, but we've had some place at the table. There's been some degree of freeing up the economy from government regulation. There's been, a great deal of degree improvement in personal liberty. I mean, gay marriage was, a huge thing. The nation kind of turned on a dime about that issue. I couldn't believe the speed at which that happened, and that was a victory for liberty, I think. I mean, that everyone should be able to should be equal before the law, including contract law, which is
Everyone should be miserable in marriage.
well,
Have we all been?
That had been my initial argument against gay marriage to my gay friends. I was saying, look, that's the one thing that you guys.
You understand, from my point of view, there's only two types of people. There are divorced people, and there are pre-divorce people, such as yourself.
Well, we're going to try and make it last for the rest of my life.
Well, if we drink enough tonight, that won't be too much longer.
I've done that once. I've done that once, and that was painful. So the other thing is that it's hard to respond with fury when your point is one of reason. Did we have a real medical emergency here? Yes, we certainly did. And it should have been recognized early on who was most vulnerable to this medical emergency. Close to half, 50,000 or so of the deaths that we've recorded that we know of have happened in nursing care. Now, much more should have been done to protect those people. Whereas it seems like there are whole segments of society that, per Sweden, didn't really need the kind of protection. And Sweden's an interesting case. I've been to Sweden, and I was prepared to really dislike it because it's a socialistic country by our standards.
Used to be socialistic.
Not nearly so
it's
much
changing.
anymore. It has changed. But it still has a kind of like, well, for one thing, there are only all 8 million, 9 million of them, I guess 10 now. And they're all Swedes. This is a point Milton Friedman made. He was being argued with by an old socialist Swedish politician, was saying, Milton, in Sweden, we have no poverty. And Milton Friedman said, that's interesting because in America, among Swedes, we have no poverty either. Anyway, it's a funny little country, and but they have a deep level of trust in their government. Not a ridiculous amount, not faith in their government, but they feel truly represented by their government. And one thing their government did early on with this was, months ago, they said, we were not fast enough to protect the people, and we lost a lot of people in nursing care, a lot of older people who were obviously much more vulnerable to this, and that was wrong, and we should not have done that. We're going to do that now. And they did that without inhibiting other people's social liberties. And I was thinking, gee, one of the reasons the Swedes probably trust their government is because their government comes out in a way ours never does and says, we were wrong. You never hear that.
You also made mention of people who are protesting or rioting, being on the other end of an economic scale. I understand that. What is so troubling for me is that for the first time in over a decade, the people on the lower end of the income scale were getting pay raises at a faster rate than people at the higher end. In other words, it was starting to work. Just in time for COVID to come and make sure that blacks and Hispanics are more unemployed than whites. And
it was starting to work. You're absolutely right. It was starting to work, but it had been a long road back from 2008. Yep. Let us not remember there was huge crowds also. And the people who get hurt most in these things are always people who are marginal, economically marginal, and kind of hanging by a thread anyway. There's some terrible statistic about the huge number of Americans that can't pull $400 together in an emergency. I forget I don't have the numbers in my head at the moment, but it's a shocking shocking percentage of Americans that couldn't in a pinch get $300 or $400 together. And so this anger, yes, recently I think that the economy was beginning to work in favor of the lowest quintile of people on the economic scale, but it came late, it came slowly, and it came at the same time that we're about to have a trillionaire, Jeff Bezos. No, there's nothing wrong with somebody being a trillionaire. Money's not a zero-sum thing. You know, it's not one of these things where if your pie slice is too big, I have to eat the pizza box. But on the other hand, it is just kind of shocking to see what a certain level of working people make compared to this extraordinary wealth.
But look at that guy who has created all that extraordinary wealth. He's done more to save people during this crisis than pretty much anybody. My folks are in their mid 80s, and I don't want them going out to stores. They're in that vulnerable category. And because of what Jeff Bezos created, there are things being delivered to their doorstep to save their lives. It's science fiction compared to what you and I grew up with.
Well, of course, he's the right guy for science fiction. He has his own rocket ship.
But, it does.
But no. I mean, no insult to him or to any of the people who've made fortunes in Silicon Valley and made fortunes with the new economy. They didn't take that away from other people. But there are a lot of people out there going like, well, you know, how does this benefit me? Of course, you and I know that in the example, for instance, that you just gave, that it actually does benefit people. But it can be hard for that to be felt. That can be known without being felt. And
are you turning soft in your old age?
Maybe I am. Maybe I am a little bit. But I mean, I'm trying to understand. I mean, I remember 50 years ago when I was writing, and I wasn't 100% wrong. I was probably wrong to be out there rioting, but I wasn't wrong about the Vietnam War. It wasn't a good war. It wasn't a wise war, and we lost that war. Now, my being out there protesting it, looking like an idiot and acting like one, probably actually prolonged that war. I probably personally prolonged that war by at least 15 minutes. Put together with all my friends, we probably prolonged it for years. Nonetheless, there was an underlying point that we were making that was not 100% wrong, and I feel that there's an underlying point. I mean, as a libertarian, I'm not crazy about seeing the police decked out like the stormtroopers from the Death Star. You know, I mean, it's like, whoa, what happened?
When you say that there was a point to your protests back against the Vietnam War, what is the truth to the protests now that you think underneath all this you agree with?
Well, see,
if you could put it in concrete,
John, that's what I'm trying to work out for myself. I don't really know. I mean, the problem with these protests is that the anger is diffuse. We know what occasioned the anger, and it's not a good thing when one group of people in a country feels that they are sort of on an enemy footing with the police. This is not a criticism of the police, and this is not a criticism of that group of people. It's just a statement of fact. There's a group of people in the United States that feel themselves to be in an enemy situation with the police, and we don't want that. But the real root causes of these protests are so complicated, run so deep, and have been building for so long that I just don't feel like trying to make an easy analysis of it.
The only thing I worry about is at the end of this, what I see is a push towards more socialism, not a push towards more empowerment for those people on the lower income side who we're talking about.
You are speaking truth to power there,
right?
John.
Yeah, which is what they need, what I need, what we all need is ownership. They need to own transportation, not to have a bus pass, but to have a car. They need to own a place to live. They need to be able to own their own kids' education so they can get the hell out of the government school.
They need a freer market.
Right. And that's what they need.
Yeah.
But that's what we all need.
Yeah.
But it seems as though they're working against it. I tell you what, lots of folks want to join in onto our conversation. Let's grab a couple of these.
Thing I just want to say about that is when you get a situation, I mean, The proponents of big government, of course, just love situations like this. They love situations like the pandemic, and they love situations like the protest. It makes people feel more and more dependent on government in one form or another. It turns us all into little baby birdies in the nest with our beaks pointed to the sky, waiting for mother government to come feed us. We're gonna get worms.
Well, what we're going to get, we're going to get fed, but it's going to be, what do they, my mom used to say, it's empty calories, that we're just going to be printing money and giving it out.
Yeah,
I worry that the money that is being printed out of nowhere right now
that's scary.
is going to be so much more deadly than this virus ever could be. That's my thought. I'll tell you what, let's get to some of these folks
Yeah,
who want to
let's
join us.
definitely.
And again, if you're on Zoom, you got to raise your hand, not physically, but with that little button that says raise hand, we'll do that. And I tell you what, we're going to go to John Roche, and then after that, we'll talk to our friend Barry Fagan. But first, John Roche, tell me, what are you drinking? Oh, we'll get him there. John, speak up and tell us, what are you drinking? Did we lose John? He's already passed out? Because we can move our way over to Barry Fagan if that's the case.
Whatever he was drinking, he drank it too fast.
It worked.
It worked.
I enjoy drinking more now than when I was young. I just can't do it as often. So I save it for special occasions like you. I tell you what, let's head over and talk to Barry Fagan. Barry Fagan is an economist of his own. Barry, what are you drinking?
So I'm sorry.
You're not drinking? Oh, what is? Oh, Dr. Pepper, you disgust me. You disgust me.
I'm really sorry. I just don't have it in me. I don't know what to tell you.
A better man would just frickin' lie.
Speaking unofficially as a professor, a proud one at the United States Air Force Academy, I'm afraid I can't tell a lie. So my apologies.
Wait, no, the honor code are for students, not for staff.
Well, we're role models. What can I tell you?
Well, that explains our problems.
Well, we'll forgive you one Dr. Pepper, but you better put some vodka in the next one.
Yes,
okay,
fair enough.
PJ, it's such a pleasure. I've enjoyed your work for so long. Delighted when you got the Mencken Fellowship at Cato. I don't know if it's a paying gig or not, but I don't really care. I'm just delighted that you're connected with them. As a 14-year-old boy, ogling Nat Lamp, big influence on my career. Much, much appreciated. So I have two questions for you, sir. Feel free to answer one or both or neither. John and I have talked about this, and I'm wondering, first of all, as someone who's in the opinion molding professions, is telling the liberal story intrinsically easier than telling the story and making the case for freedom? For example, it's easier to believe, for example, that bad stuff just happens and government needs to do something. It's much harder to show the role that incentives and bad laws from 50 years ago play in making these bad things happen. So the concentrated benefits versus diffuse costs, you know about all that. So I'm wondering if the deck is inherently stacked against the freedom narrative. And then related to that, are liberals inherently funnier? Is it easier to be funny as a liberal? And
before PJ takes it, let me make it really clear. I think that liberals, progressives understand humor a whole lot more than we do. They get it. I look at any comedy, 30 Rock on NBC, done by a bunch of progressives, but they knew
West Wing.
Yeah, they need to go for the joke first, and then they slide in the message. Whenever a conservative wants to be funny, they take the message and try to put it as a pie in your face, and it's so ham-handed. Very few people can do it. Someday PJ might be able to do it.
I'll try.
So, yeah, go ahead.
The answer to your questions are yes and yes. And really, when it comes to telling the liberal narrative versus telling the libertarian story, freedom is complex, tyranny is simple. It's very simple to look at a set of problems, and boy, we've got a set of problems right now, and say, well, we should pass a bunch of laws against this. We should pass laws against police brutality. Never mind that laws against police brutality happen to already exist. We should pass a law against poverty. We should pass a law. We should do this. We should do that. And anytime you make the argument for liberty, you go, boy, you know, there are 380 million individual viewpoints that we have to take into account anytime we want to do anything, because, you know, our duty is to protect the individual liberty, individual dignity, individual responsibility. It's really complicated. And so, yes, the liberals have a tremendous advantage with this, because their point of view, their worldview is proscriptive. Our worldview is descriptive, and what we ask for is infinitely complex, which is a maximum amount of liberty for a maximum number of individuals that's possible under rule of law. Tough nut to crack. Liberals are funnier. I think John pretty much put his finger on it. Not so much because there's something more inherently funny about their worldview than we all know very witty conservatives, very amusing conservatives. William F. Buckley, just to begin with. And very witty libertarians, had Crane from Cato. It's that liberals understand show business much better than libertarians or conservatives do. And the reason for that is that show business is a people-pleasing enterprise. And the liberal line is usually adhered to by people in show business, because if you want to get a cheer standing up on the stage, you want to be saying things like, you're all going to get a free car. You know, everybody in the audience gets a free car. Never mind that it's an Oldsmobile or a Pontiac or whatever it was. Some brand they don't make anymore. And liberals, because show business attracts a lot of liberals have a lot more experience with show business. They're better showmen. And just as you said, John, they tell the joke and then slip the knife in afterward.
Well, let's grab a few more of these Zoom calls. Barry, thank you so much. I'll tell you what, if you are on and you want to be on, just raise your hand again. We'll unmute you. So don't worry, don't touch your computer. We control your computer. We control the vertical. We control the horizontal. Let's see if we can get John Roach back on. John, don't touch anything. What are you drinking tonight?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Oh, wonderful. It used to be in Manhattan.
Oh, God. Nothing happier than an empty glass.
It'll be a second in Manhattan.
Now it still is a Manhattan. It's just the Fifth Avenue shopping district of Manhattan.
Yeah.
Hey, John and PJ, you guys live in my two favorite states. I spent 15 years about 2 towns east of PJ, and now I live here in Golden. And I seem to be jinxed with moving to formerly red states that are now turning purple and blue. And I'm interested in both of your comments on how this can be reversed.
Well, in Colorado, we need to build a wall. The wall needs to keep the Californians out, and we need to pay for it. It's tough because we're going to run out of free places to go. People are moving out to Wyoming. They're going to Texas and to Florida, where taxes are lower. And as the progressives take over and turn us into California, more real Coloradans will be heading out there. Or you can give up on society altogether and move to New Hampshire, as some anti-socials do. PJ, where do you live again?
That's a low blow, John.
I live in a town, it was so tiny that they had to change the sign coming into town. When my son was born, we went from 300 to 301. The dynamic is that people move here or there because of the lower taxes, less onerous regulation, more elbow room, lower property values, et cetera. And they get here and they say, well, where are all those wonderful government services that we had down in Massachusetts? You know, we had free daycare, and we had kids got to go to kindergarten for 6 years, and we had, free this and free that, and counseling and clinics and stuff. And we get up here and we don't have any of that stuff. And those of us who live up here is because He said, we don't have any of that stuff because it costs money, and we got to get money by taking it away from people. And what amazes me about the Massachusetts Flatlanders that come up here is well, we're big liberals. We're only going to take the money from rich people, with no sort of sense that they are the rich people, And Governor John Sununu once pointed out that New Hampshire was a relatively efficient state, partly because we had an incredibly unfair tax system.
Property tax only.
Property tax only. We have no income tax. We have no sales tax. We have no broad-based tax. And it's only property tax. And that property tax that hits young couples, that hits old people. It hits a lot of people very unfairly. It hits people whose property has become valuable because of its location, not because of its inherent value. So it's an unfair tax. And therefore, we are very reluctant to raise that tax and therefore reluctant to spend, which makes for a much more efficient government. But that's a kind of a tough way of going about it. Will we ever get over it? I'm not sure, although I'll tell you, Elizabeth Warren took a huge beating up here in the primaries. And I was on a radio show that night during the primaries. I was covering the primaries, and I was on a radio show with Dan Ray. Some people watching may know Dan Ray's Nightside political show that he's been doing for years and years. And Dan and I were in his booth, and Governor Sununu, Chris Sununu, Governor John Sununu's son, who's now the governor of New Hampshire, walked by, and Dan Ray said, come on in, grab a mic. And he turns to the governor and says, Governor, Elizabeth Warren seems to be taking a real beating here in New Hampshire. Did she do something wrong? And Governor Sununu, without missing a beat, says, she campaigned here. Dan Ray was sort of speechless, and Governor Sununu says, people got to know her.
Well, John and PJ, summer in New Hampshire, winter in Colorado, the perfect life.
If only I could afford it. Thank you. I tell you what, let's keep rolling with this. This is spectacular. I see that William Vetter is on the line on Zoom. So William Vetter, tell me, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking Talisker Storm Scotch.
I cannot take Talisker. There's something about Talisker just doesn't work for me.
It's too peaty for you, but I saw you drink Lafroig. Lafroig is to Scotch what Guinness is to beer.
Agreed, but there's something about Talisker. There's a show on, I think it's on Amazon Prime, simply called Scotch. And it's this pseudo documentary, that's all documentaries are now. And it's got this, these guys talking about Scotch as, it's like a fine woman. First you go up and say, hello, how are you? And give it a sniff. And then you go up again. If it's an alcoholic stream because it makes your Scotch addiction seem classy. Anyway, keep going.
The question I have is when I look at the problems in this world and our situation, I come out with the conclusion that ultimately the problem is political coercion is based upon theft. And when the Constitution was first enacted, the theft that the federal government could do was only in the form of tariffs, which they then, of course, stacked against the South and but at least it was limited. And in my view, when people can steal money, that's what creates the deep state. It creates the welfare state. It creates the warfare state, because all of these people can get money by taxing people who produce. They claim it's the rich. Well, it's productive people. And this giving away of money that we see today in response to this virus, that's just created.
Take your white privilege and stick it, because that's all that is. No, first of all, both you and PJ are sitting in front of these bookshelves, and I'm convinced neither one of you have read any of those books. I think it's just for show. Um, just a thought.
I have not.
I haven't read a lot of those books, but I did write a bunch of them.
And did you read those? So let's take Bill's question to PJ, which is, and I've heard people ask this: is taxation theft or is it slavery? And what they mean is, after the basic role of government, of those things that are clearly defined and limited, when government takes more than that and gives it out in favors, well, you are forced to pay that. Is that theft? Is it slavery? What are taxes beyond what is the base purpose for government? Let's bring that to PJ.
Well, I think it's both. I mean, and there is a sort of bondage, a sort of servitude that taxes impose upon us, and there is definitely theft of property and services involved in taxation beyond the absolute minimum level that can be had. One of the great things about the original way that income for government was set up by means of tariffs was that it was pretty much invisible to the ordinary consumer. They paid more for imported goods, but then again, there weren't all that many imported goods. Most imported goods were luxuries, and so no one really felt the burden of taxation really until the Civil War. The burden of taxation. The other thing America was able to do, and this is, of course, was theft from the Native Americans, was that the American government financed itself to a large extent for many, many years by selling land that they'd conquered. It wasn't their land, it was land that belonged to the Cherokees and the Sioux and the Potawatomis and the Ottawas and the Miamis and so on. But there was a large aspect that was direct theft. But I think that creating a form of taxation, and New Hampshire I go back to as an example, where we have to pay almost all of our taxes through a few fees, but mostly through property taxes. It's a rather unfair system of taxation, but it limits the ability of the government to tax. Reagan wanted to defund the government. One of Reagan's aims was to defund the government, but it didn't work because he didn't attack the system of taxation. He managed to lower rates, but he didn't get rid of the income tax or get rid of any substantial tax.
And I'll add something to that. The idea that you can starve the beast by cutting off taxes works if there's a zero-sum game of money creation. But when the government can just go into debt and create new dollars out of thin air, it hides that taxation in a more immoral way. You are taxing people who aren't even born yet for the spending we're doing now.
Yeah.
That is a definition of evil.
Right, and that was not. That's really not been addressed by any Republican administration. The debt has continued to soar under Republican administrations as well as under Democratic administrations, for the simple reason that you point out, that the government has the power to print more of this junk, and eventually, it's amazing it hasn't come back to bite us in a Weimar Republic sort of way already. But sooner or later.
I don't know how it doesn't. I just don't know if it happens in a year, 5 years, 50 years, but at some point it works. All right, let's grab some of these other callers. Let's talk to Abby. Abby, tell me, what are you drinking, and have you had enough that I'm starting to look good?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. I'm drinking. I just got a Cab Sav actually at the bar.
You got a what out of what?
I got a Cabernet.
Oh, thank you.
I'm actually at Hillsdale College right now.
What they have Cabernet at Hillsdale College?
They do.
That's just grape juice. You've got Welch's grape juice. I've been to Hillsdale. They don't allow any booze anywhere.
It depends. If you teach at one of their schools, they provide you with booze every evening.
They do? And do you
They
teach at one of their
do.
schools, Abby?
I do.
What do you teach?
I teach math.
Math? I thought there was only religion and economics there.
It feels kind of like there's only religion and history and literature here. And then they get a little bit of economics, and I feel like I often fight for math. And Brad, I agree, math can be a religion, and it's probably mine.
And by the way, I love the forced perspective of your booze. It looks like your glass is the size of your head, as it should be. All right, take it away. Abby.
It's not. Okay, so I joined kind of late, so if I missed something, I apologize, and I'm trying to get away from kind of the noise in the ballroom where I'm at. And it's late here.
No, it's only late for Hillsdale. For those people who don't know what Hillsdale is, it is by far one of the greatest schools, colleges ever. They take no government money. They teach real economics, real history. They teach people how to think. The problem is they pump out a whole bunch of squares. I know because I employ many of those squares who graduate from Hillsdale. So however you snuck in that bit of Welch's grape juice, I applaud you. That you will be fired tomorrow.
They're pretty great here. So I with all the protests going on, I really have an issue with a month ago. It was dangerous and selfish to be protesting, and now it's celebrated. And I think that everyone absolutely has a right to be protesting, but everyone should have the right to protest. Everyone should have that right equally. And then in addition to that, where do you draw the line between protesting and rioting?
Let's bring that to a man who has both protested, rioted, and I don't think he's ever had Cabernet. PJ, the frustration many of us feel is the media celebration of going out in the streets, taking off your mask, linking arm in arm because it's about civil liberties. It's about taking on white privilege. When 2 weeks earlier, when a bunch of rowdy conservatives did it, they were killing people.
You'll find it in the same sentence from the media. How we have to absolutely, we must obey every possible dictate of lockdown procedure, and we must celebrate the protesters. Well, that's just ridiculous. I mean, as I said earlier, I'm not without sympathy for the anger that set off the protests, and I think that one of the reasons for that anger was the huge government overreach during this pandemic. I'm not sure that's a conscious reason for the protests, but I'm sure that being, it's fine for all these governors in their governor's mansions, all these mayors in their mayor's mansions, and the president in the White House to be locked down in their lovely places. But try it in the projects with 3 kids, and 2 bedrooms, and a living room the size of a bath mat. People are going to build up anger. There really is nothing we can do. We can point it out, but there's nothing we can honestly do about the liberal hypocrisy, because they don't understand the concept of hypocrisy. If you are right about everything, and you know in your heart that you're right about everything, that you know what's best for everybody, then it is impossible for you to contradict yourself. If you are right about everything, then everything you say is right.
What gets me the most on the progressive thought is the radical intolerance, the radical lack of diversity. They know what's right. If you believe in diversity, if you believe in choice, you have to embrace capitalism. You have to embrace the ownership that comes with that. If not, you are surrendering your power to some elite, and that elite makes choices for you. And I'm amazed how many people on the left who scream about diversity, scream about tolerance, are the very ones who themselves cannot tolerate someone going to a different school, or deciding to own a firearm, or deciding to have a different healthcare plan, or deciding to live in a different place, or deciding to drive a car instead of taking mass transit, or to, heaven forbid, have a plastic straw or a plastic bag. It is the intolerance of the left that I find most hypocritical. Agree?
Well,
Disagree?
it's when you have a misplaced religious faith. One of my big problems with the whole left-wing spectrum of politics is most of these people don't believe in God, and they have replaced it with a false God, and because people have to believe in something. So they begin to believe in the state, or in a sort of elite that runs the state. They have a passionate religious faith that just happens to be that they're playing for the other team. They're worshiping something that's not worthy of worship. I have no objection to people not believing in God. I do, but I'm not going to insist that other people do. But to replace that belief in God with a belief in the state and the sanctity of their opinions. And so they don't regard us as agreeing or disagreeing with them. We disagree among ourselves. We do it all the time. But they don't regard this disagreement of ours as a disagreement. They regard it as a heresy. We have violated their religious faith. You should not have a religious faith in the institutions of man. Let us hope that we have institutions that we can trust, at least sometimes, but trust is different than faith. To have a religious belief in the institutions of man is, frankly, satanic.
When you say that they are certain in their faith, they're certain it's true, and I can think of no better area than that of environmentalism. And that they are so certain of this that they're working to save the planet. There's nothing bigger, there's nothing better than saving the planet. Yeah, Americans might have saved the world from communism and fascism, but we're saving the entire globe. My favorite photograph ever, maybe you've seen it, is of the 1917 Tour de France, because you have to say it Tour de France. You can't say Tour de France,
Right.
Otherwise you just sound like an American. And they're about ready to go up the big hill. And each and every one of the guys, 100 years ago, has a cigarette in his mouth. Because the thinking was, the scientific consensus was, if you smoke, it opens up your lungs, and you want to open up your lungs before you take the last big hill in the Tour de France. And now we look at that and go, that's ridiculous. And maybe banning straws is a good idea. Maybe it will save the planet. But if that's the case, you should be able to convince me to give up my straw, not coerce me to give up my straw. But they're so certain that they're empowered and feel righteous, religious righteousness, taking away that straw. And they go to bed at night feeling like they've done something good, when in fact all they've done is ripped away choice, ripped away people's ability to make their own decisions, and they ripped away their requirement to convince me to go to a paper straw. Thoughts?
Well, this is, I mean, I consider myself to be an environmentalist. I mean, this is the conservative side of me. Conservatives conserve. But somebody pointed this out, and I don't remember who it was, but it says, don't worry about the planet. The planet will be fine. It's people that we should be worried about. And if we undertake a sort of radical environmentalism that harms people, there are 1 billion or 2 people in the world who are inches from starvation. Our first thought has to be for them. If you pursue this sort of again, it's misplaced worship. If you worship the planet, now the planet's going to be fine. People may all be dead, but the planet will still be here, and it's not going to care. You know, you do not worship idols, and Earth is an idol as well as.
The reason we can't get a plastic straw here in the state of Colorado, where no straw can make it to the ocean, is because there was a video of a straw up some turtle's nose, and you know what they don't understand is, you know,
the turtle was doing cocaine.
Yeah, doing cocaine. No, the turtle killed my father. He deserved to die. All right, let's grab a few more of these Zoomers. And
hey, Abby.
Oh, I think Abby is now drunk at.
I just want you to say hi to Dr. Arn for me, please.
Yeah, say hi to Dr. Arn for me too. Actually, I emailed him the other day.
I will absolutely say hi to Dr. Arn.
He is. He's done incredible things with that. The problem is I don't like saying nice things about any school where I have no chance of getting enrolled. That's why I went to the University of Colorado. Let's say hello to John. John's been waiting for a long time. Tell me, John. You don't need to. We'll unmute you. What are you drinking? He hasn't responded. John, are you out there? You have to talk a little bit.
I see
There we
a
go.
space.
Are you
There you
there,
are, John? Yes, welcome. What are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking Bullet Rye whiskey.
Ooh.
And I'm here with my daughter, Leanna, who,
Hi, Leanna.
as a young woman, was a resident of the People's Republic of Belarus.
Really?
And we converted her. And I'm trying to make her a really, really good cook.
And wait, what's her name again? I'm sorry, I missed your name.
John Henderson, and this is my daughter, Leanna.
Leanne, if you are being held against your will, blink rapidly. We will send someone.
She's drawing her weapon now because I can guarantee you, John, she's a very good shot, and I will have her at the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Party this fall, which hopefully we are not disbanding.
We are not going to disband it. By the way, if PDA doesn't know this, we do our Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Party once a year. You should come out for it, PJ, where we smoke, drink, and shoot before the nannies stop us. So we'll be doing that sometime in August. And if they won't let us do it, we will call it a protest, and therefore
then they'll have to let us do it.
They'll have to let us do it.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question for PJ, and that is that basically, and John, you and I have discussed this 6 weeks ago when it looked like everything was collapsing, and then we didn't see everything that was coming in the next 3 or 4 weeks. The left believes the revolution is here. The media believes the revolution is here. The big corporations who are donating to Black Lives Matter seem to be hedging their bets that the revolution is here. In 1968, violence was rejected. Now it seems to be rewarded. So, PJ, is the revolution here? Are they right about that?
By the way, I have a daughter about the same age, and I recognize the look of, I am only months away from liberation when I can go to college and get away from you, old man. I know that look very well.
My daughter swears she still loves me.
I do.
Yes, because she wants your money. Mine says the same thing.
No.
Oh,
No,
mine.
John, she's a very good shot, and I'll prove that to you this.
I'm sure she is. I'm sure she's a talented lady. But let's not kid ourselves. If you and I didn't have a credit card, our daughters wouldn't tell us the time of day. They wouldn't walk over across the street to pee on us if we were on fire. We are ATMs for our daughters.
No, I paid for my wedding. I didn't ask my dad for any help.
Really?
And she's a good shot.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a good shot. All
Yeah.
right. All right, we'll bring it to PJ. Are we in the revolution?
The revolution's not here. The revolution's not here. And having been there back there in the 60s when we thought the revolution was upon us, we absolutely thought the revolution was upon us. And we finally got the vote at age 18. We finally got the vote. And what happened? Richard Nixon was elected. It was worse than nothing. Richard Nixon got elected. And people can't keep things in proportion. It's a nation of 380 million people. How many people have really been involved in these protests, even in the largest, vaguest, most kissy-huggy versions of these protests? At colleges and prep schools and so on. I'm not talking about the violent inner city protests or the violent downtown protests. What number of people have actually been involved in this? Is probably about the same as the I'm trying to even think of a small enough group to compare this to. It's probably like the Oldsmobile Owners Club of America probably has more members than we're actually out there on that street. It looks good on TV. But TVs, it's a pretty narrow focus. You don't realize that one street over, nothing is happening. And the other thing is about television cameras, having spent a long time as a print journalist, which means that you often come together with TV crews, is even the TV journalists refer to the television camera as a, how to put this politely, an a-hole magnet. You can be standing there with a notebook and absolutely nothing will happen. You can be standing there with a still camera and maybe one or two people will like get up and like misbehave for you. But when the TV crew arrives, all hell breaks loose.
Amazing. Well, I tell you what, by the way, John, I'm surprised you let your daughter get married. My daughter is not allowed to do any such thing because I can shoot better than her. And that's the way that will always be. Let's grab a few more of these calls, and we got to let PJ have an evening at home.
Yeah, it's late here.
It's late here. It's past his bedtime. Let's take a few more of these. And also, I do want to talk to you about your upcoming book, which has been delayed because of COVID, I believe. So I want to get to that.
No, not delayed.
As well.
Actually, it's going to come out when it was.
Tell me about it.
Well, it's called A Cry from the Far Middle, because basically, as a libertarian, I've always felt that my thinking represented an ordinary sort of person's thinking. I mean, I didn't feel that there was, I don't have some huge political agenda or some big theory to propound, or, you know, I just feel that individual liberty, individual dignity, individual responsibility is a common sense approach to society. And that most people at some level share this common sense approach. And so I've been very worried for a long time now about how politics has become in America. And I just plain hate politics. I mean, politics is the way.
You're a satirist. How can you hate politics?
Well,
you made your living off of this for nearly 50 years.
I love it when it acts up, obviously, because it gives me a paycheck. But coming down to it, I just really I hate politics. I mean, when we call somebody a real politician, is that a compliment? When we say that somebody played politics at work to get a job or a promotion, does that mean he or she deserves it? You know, I mean, do we ever use the word politics in any complimentary sense? And politics is the idea that all of humans' needs and all of human problems and all of humanity, everything that matters about being human, that it can all be addressed politically. And this is like a recipe for it's like a cookbook where the recipe for everything is to fry it. You know, your salad is fried, your soup is fried, you know, your mashed potatoes are fried, your fruit cocktail, you know, your dessert is fried, your bottle of beer is rolled in breadcrumbs and dumped into deep fat fryer. There's just no way to cook up a social banquet, you know? So that's what the book is about. And then, but I wrote it, you know, back before some guy in a Wuhan wet market ate an undercooked bat and all hell.
Let's grab a few more of these Zoomers, and we'll let you put on your footy pajamas and say goodnight. Let's talk to Patty. Patty, tell me, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a Columbia Crest Cabernet.
Ooh.
Oh, good.
How about that?
Do tell us.
Okay, so PJ, I think I recall watching you for the very first time on a cable network way back when. Can you tell me if you were actually on one of those? Because I remember you being like one of those conservative voices that I actually really loved. And then it seemed like as the years went by, you became a little bit more libertarian. What was your journey there?
It is interesting because I think it's hard to figure out once you get over something like youthful radicalism. It is hard to figure out where to place yourself. I'm so conservative personally in so many ways. You know, I'm religiously conservative. I'm socially conservative. Except socially conservative now means that you hate gays, and I just don't think that's any of my business. Who loves whom? I don't see that as a part of social conservatism, but I do like tradition. I do like, and so, but when it comes to politics, I found that all parties disappoint. I think that's a fundamental tenet of libertarianism. All parties want more power for the want more political power. They're even willing to let the other party build more political power and hope that they can take it over later. And so, I moved from some faith in conservatism back in the early Reagan years to a more skeptical attitude toward political conservatives, and maybe a more libertarian outlook. I also didn't like the way that conservatives have a way of joining forces with very intolerant, very narrow-minded people. And I'm not going to go there with hateful people, a basket of deplorables or anything like that. But there are some people out there with prejudices that they shouldn't have, and attitudes that are unfriendly and unkind and unchristian. And I don't like, and some of them are the loudest Christians among us too. And I don't like the way that political conservatives ally themselves with those people. So that kind of drives me in a libertarian direction.
Not only did you do, cable and all those other good things, I occasionally hear you on the one NPR show I can stomach. Now, I'm an NPR addict, but I find them to be absolutely one of the most forceful agents for political objectives ever. It is state-run propaganda for me, but they're so good at it. Going back to our comments on how
you're talking about wait, don't tell me.
I'm talking about wait, don't tell me. How in the world does somebody like you get on an NPR game show, which is a really popular show for those who don't know it? You're like the standout, progressive comedian, progressive NPR folks, progressive interview guest, and PJ O'Rourke, satirist. How did you land this gig?
I think they probably needed a token Republican. I mean, I love the NPR folk dearly, and they really are good at their jobs, but they do fall into the sort of automatic liberal sort of sensibility. And I kid them about it. I say, you do a news piece on unions. You tell both sides of the story. You interview somebody from the AFL and somebody from the CIO. And they laugh. They know they have a certain sense of humor about this. Like they have a certain sense of humor about always putting bird noises in the back of all of their.
It cannot be news if there are sound effects,
exactly.
Background music.
Somebody there with like two half of coconuts making
right. At which point, if there's sound effects and music in the background, it is an editorial piece.
Yeah.
That you're drawing an emotional picture
but they
for the listener.
They do really good radio.
They do great radio, but so did Orson Welles, and both of them are made up.
Well, there you go.
There you go. All right, let's grab one more Zoomer, then PJ, we're gonna let you.
Yeah, let me get my bunny slippers on.
Bunny slippers on. Let's talk to Hattie Bryant. Hattie, tell me, what is it you're drinking tonight?
Okay, I'm here in Gulf Shores, Alabama, with my girlfriend Marilyn, and she's from Denver, and she's the reason we're watching this program.
Oh, I'm so glad. And you occasionally disappear too, which is a wonderful thing. You got a David Copperfield thing going on.
Is that better? We are on the Redneck Riviera and drinking Redneck Riviera whiskey. Can you see the picture?
No, put in. There you go. Well, now I can't see you at all.
Anyway, you know the country music artist John Rich?
No, I enjoy actual music.
Listen, you know, he wrote,
you're terrible.
Ride a horse, save a cowboy.
Ride a horse, save a cowboy.
Okay, but he also makes this whiskey, and we decided we should be drinking it when we called because we're on the Redneck Riviera.
Where exactly is the Redneck Riviera?
Okay, we are in Gulf Shores, Alabama, But actually, the Riviera starts probably past Christian, Mississippi. If you come out of New Orleans and drive east for 1 hour, you are on the white sands of the Panhandle, which starts in Mississippi, goes to Alabama, then goes on to Pasca.
No matter how you cut it, Hattie, you're still in Alabama, which begs the question: if you get a divorce in Alabama, are you still brother and sister?
John, you're terrible.
He is really bad. Okay, so Marilyn, who's your Colorado audience, and the reason we called in, she's got the question.
Okay.
Go ahead, Marilyn.
So, how long are conservatives, libertarians, whatever you want to call us, going to stand for this stuff? I mean, how long do we sit back and say, well, it's okay for riots, camping outside the capitals of, of Seattle, of Denver? I mean, when do we say enough? And when do we get aggressive about resisting?
Yeah, the difference is when we get aggressive, it's racism and hate. When they get aggressive, it's civil rights. Now, PJ doesn't know this because he actually lives in America, but here in Denver, all around us, the homeless encampments are growing and growing and growing. And it's been amazing to see how many of those encampments now have younger people in them with Black Lives Matters signs outside, almost as if they're moving in to do this. And it's one of these things. I look at the homeless around our building, and they need help, but instead we keep them on the streets. So let's take it there. You can sense the frustration there, PJ, which is this: it doesn't feel right. We should do something, but what is it we do?
Well, one of the things that makes us libertarian and conservative is that we don't jump the gun on this stuff. We don't overreact to it. And I think it's going to be a slow cure. I think we're going to probably have to have an election cycle or two where we're going to have some real idiots in office, some really major idiots.
Oh, that'll be a change.
Yeah, won't that be an eye-opener? Yeah. And I think that they're going to have to prove, I think we're going to have a kind of a liberal lefty sort of wave of elections, and they're going to have to be left in office long enough to prove just what miserable failures they are and how horrible they can make society. And that's usually what turns things around. It certainly worked with Jimmy Carter.
I'm going to disagree with you in that whenever we get that Republican backlash, when Republicans get into office, they spend like drunk Democrats. I remember thinking, man, could you imagine having a Republican president, a Republican House, a Republican Congress, all the reforms we could do? And then that happened under George W., and we ended up spending more money, increasing the size of government at a faster rate than when Johnson was president. And I'm not even talking about military spending included. I'm talking about other spending. We outlawed the light bulb. We did bridges to nowhere. We took away people's First Amendment rights with McCain-Feingold. And now we have a Republican president, and I love most of what he's doing, but he's joining with the Democrats to print money out of nowhere. Republicans are really good in the minority because they act like Republicans because they can't do anything. The minute they get into office, into the majority, and I've seen it here in Colorado, and I've seen it nationally, they turn into Democrats very quickly. Am I wrong?
The minute they get into office, the office gets into them.
There you go.
And one of the reasons that we don't react politically as well in as well organized a manner as the liberals do is that we have a fundamental distrust of politics, even on our own side. We know its limitations, and it's just unfortunately the nation is going to have to learn a lesson in political folly.
What 8 years of Obama wasn't a lesson enough?
Apparently not.
Apparently not. Hey, Hattie, thank you so much for the call. PJ, I'm going to let you go, but I got to ask just a couple more quick questions.
Quick, sure.
We haven't talked politics nationwide. You're going to be voting this fall. Are you going to be voting for Trump? Are you going to be voting for Biden? I really don't know where.
No, I'm going to be voting for the Libertarian candidate, whoever that may be, and I probably won't remember who that is till I can see the ballot, and then I'll forget it by the time I walk out the door. Libertarians haven't been putting up like really strong candidates.
Has Trump surprised you in any good way, or has he been kind of what you expected?
He surprised in terms of his domestic economic policy. He did surprise me in a good way. But it's just you know, I've raised 3 toddlers, and I'm just sort of familiar with the personality, and you know, 4 years of a toddler is a long time. You know.
Yeah, but look at the bright side. Sometimes they turn into teenagers, which is even worse.
There's that. I sort of feel like we had a teenage president previous to Trump, you know, with all that sort of empty idealism, you know, and now we've got a toddler president. It might be time for a grown up. And but not quite as grown up as Biden.
Hey, I want to thank you so much. I don't know if I can open this up in time. When you were here, I don't know, it must have been 10 years ago.
It was 10, plus at least 10, yeah.
Obama won the Nobel Peace Prize for all of his future accomplishments.
Yes.
And so at our dinner, we gave everybody their own Nobel Peace Prize, adorned with your beautiful face on it. So we we still have a couple of these around for that we prize. And PJ, we prize you. Looking forward to your book. And hey, thank you so much for everything you do for us. I'm just really, really grateful.
You're
Thanks
welcome,
for drinking.
and it's really good to see all of you and talk to all of you, and have a good evening.
Good night. And to everyone else, have a great evening. Thanks for being part of this.